Hello and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Tea Time SEO show run by Authoritas. I'm SEO Joe Blogs, and I'm joined here by Carrie Shepherd. Thank you all for coming to our now 40th edition of Tea Time SEO. This is where we encourage everyone to get together, take a 15-minute break, come with your tea or coffee, and maybe some cake, and learn something new. So we have two great speakers today talking about content audits, Charlie and Oli. So please drop your questions in the chat and they'll be able to answer any questions you have about content at the end of their talk. So without further ado, I'm going to pass over to Oli, who will share his tips, and then Charlie, and we'll see you for Q&A. Over to you.
Perfect. Thanks, Joe. So I'm Oli. I'm the search strategist at StrategiQ. I started out as a copywriter before moving into paid social, paid search, and now primarily SEO and content strategy. I've been lucky enough to devise digital strategies for large global brands, as well as make an impact for small local businesses. So just to start off with a few content marketing stats. So 91% of pages don't get any organic traffic from Google whatsoever. There's 70 million new posts published on WordPress each month, and 70% of content gets no links whatsoever. So it's difficult to break through the noise. Tip number one, you don't always need to create new content. So in this example, it's one of the clients of mine. We focused on upcycling old content and making it relevant. We considered the keyword targets and the intent that we needed to match. And in doing so, we made our page what we feel the best for that targeted query. And that's reflected in the uplift in traffic. And I hope it's obvious when we began that process. Tip number two, search operators are your friend. So using the basic site : search and entitle operators, you can identify any pages on your site that may be competing for the same query if they're both mentioned in the page title itself. Even better if you were using the Google Analytics or Google Search Console APIs to pull that data straight into your crawling software or do a mass export. And I know Charlie's going to touch on that a bit more further into the presentation. And finally, if there is some competition or cannibalization going on, it may be worthwhile consolidating that content into one powerhouse piece of content as opposed to two that have lightly touched on the topic, for example. Tip number three, before you consolidate any content, you need to look at both the organic traffic that's it's generating, but also overall traffic. So you need to understand the role and purpose of each piece of content. So this is when the whole debate around push versus pull marketing approaches comes in. So it may not be generating organic search traffic, which is more the pull marketing side of things, but it actually may be really relevant and get lots of engagement on your social media channels, for example. So that's more the push element. So if we go back to that original stat where 91% of pages don't get any traffic, that does not mean that they don't serve a purpose, but you just got to consider how people are engaging with them. Tip number four, so it's important that you review any high performing content. So take a look at what is ranking well and ask yourself, what are they doing well? What extra value are they providing relative to our content? And then look to meet and exceed the value that they provide. So ask yourself, do these high performing pages have any assets that differentiate them? Do they use video embeds really well? Is there a great downloadable resource? Is it more comprehensive than ours? Just start to consider some of those types of questions. In addition, you should look at standard on-page elements. So heading structure, copy length, internal linking, just to get a feel for how they're promoting their content, as well as the rough length that and how comprehensive you need to go. You need to consider, are off-page factors having an influence? They've got some really strong, powerful backlinks that are helping them. And finally, you can use a third-party tool to get an idea of the topic that the page could rank for. So not looking at keywords in isolation, but a wider topical focus. So I've got an example here. So I've just ran a high-performing blog about content audits through Ahrefs. So you can see here that it ranks for nearly 550 keywords. So with a bit of sorting and filtering, you can break that down to look at any terms that are in the top 10 positions or have a reasonable search volume, over a couple of hundred searches per month, for example. And then you can run it through some other keyword tools to get a feel for the rough volume that that's generating. And that may lead you to some interesting findings about other related terms that you can cover on that page. So with the topic of content audits, for example, content audit template, you may have a downloadable resource, like I said before, or you may be able to incorporate elements around content inventory. And I know that's something that Charlie is touching upon. And fifth and final point is to always review the SERPs. So you need to consider the intent. So is it informational? Is it transactional? Are there any similarities or commonalities between the best performing content? And if Google is favoring guide content, so informational intent, don't try to rank a product page, which is more transactional commercial intent. So I've got an example here. So for the popular term ecotourism trips, you can see that Google is rewarding guide content, but not just guide content. They're more of the listicle, list-based articles. So you've got top 24, top 29, top 10, top 12, top 8. So in order to be amongst it, you need to produce a list item based article that's in a numbered list rather than just focusing on one ecotourism destination, for example. And you don't always need to create an ultimate guide. So I'm a massive advocate for creating ultimate guides because they're very comprehensive. They can cover a lot of different topics. They can act as sort of pillar pages, but they're not necessary for every single query. So it's important to look at the SERPs and see if they warrant a separate page. So in this example, I've looked at the term Kaizen event. So Kaizen is the Japanese term for continuous improvement. So you could write an ultimate guide to Kaizen. But when you look at that particular term, it's clear that Google's rewarding individual pages that are comprehensive about Kaizen events as opposed to the broader Kaizen ultimate guide style content. But ultimately, what we're trying to do is aspire for best in class. Make your page the best result for that query. So you're like the individual on the right as opposed to the competitors on the left. And over to Charlie now.
Cheers, Oli. Hi, I'm Charlie. I'm an independent SEO and content strategist working under the name Chop Digital. I've been working in SEO for longer than I care to admit to anyone, doing just about every kind of job from technical specialist to copywriting to content marketing and kind of everything between. Been running my consultancy for about 2.5 years and also help run digital marketing events in Oxford, which is where I'm based. So the common way of thinking about an SEO content audit is where you analyze the performance of all the content on your site to determine whether your stuff should be kept as it is, whether you're going to improve it, delete it, consolidate it, redirect it, that kind of thing. It's sort of trying to get a handle on everything that's happening with your site content-wise. And the idea is that a healthier site with fewer underperforming, low-quality style pages will be the result at the end. Some of the questions you want your audience to be able to answer are like what content marketing is, or content generally is performing best with my audience, which content just isn't working or it's just rubbish, as maybe done in the past, how can I improve my overall strategy, which pages represent the best opportunities for improvement, and so on. It's about just kind of like coming up with a comprehensive understanding of everything happening with all our site's content. To do this, we need to look at both the quantitative and the qualitative aspects of our content. which I'll go through now. So first of all, quantitative. And I think if you want your content audit to really make a difference to your strategy and your site's performance, if you want to find a lot of actionable improvements, then a content inventory is the way to go. You gather lots of data points about every page on the site and come back with quick batches of improvements and lots of recommendations. One of the first people to talk about this in SEO was Everett Sizemore, I think back in 2015. The article here was updated in 2017. Trying to get it's not a new idea in SEO, but still not enough people really are doing it to the kind of level you need to be doing it to really make a difference. In the next slide, I kind of talk some more ideas on this that have been done by various ones. I strongly recommend you check out some of these articles. The one from the Future.agency and Siege Media, great articles about doing content audits. And Coding is for Losers and Ahrefs also did a really good post, but also produced templates for this. Oli and I were talking about this the other day. There's a really good one from both of these guys that actually guide you through how to put in different data points and then comes up with a series of recommendations for each piece you're looking at based on benchmarks that you've sort of predetermined. They give you some starting ones and you can put your own ones in after, tune it to whatever works for you. But what's really cool about this is that it kind of gives you a starting point for doing things. If you do nothing else and you do this process, you'll get some really good ideas of the size of the content on your site and maybe some ways of looking at what needs to be improved, what needs to be got rid of, and what you can keep. I tend to go further though. I'm still learning sort of how to do the best stuff in Google Sheets, but I tend to go a bit further when producing my own ones and use lots of different tools, lots of different data points. So there's a few recommendations I've got coming up, which sort of list some of the tools you can use to get data for your audit, your inventory. So you want to do a crawl of your site, something like Sitebulb, Screaming Frog, Deep Crawl, etc. You want backlink data, Ahrefs, Majestic, Moz, and so on. Visibility data, Systrix, Ahrefs, SEMrush, all good for that. Of course, you want Google Analytics data. You want to look at, as Oli pointed out, not just your organic data, but also how many page views for all channels pages have got. A page might have got no traffic organically, but thousands of clicks from other sources or just part of the user journey. And of course, you want organic performance. We've got great data from Search Console for that. Now, I like to get all these different sources together, but it's also important to have lots and lots of URLs. Don't just get the URLs that are crawl of the active site. Try and get every URL. So you can, from Search Console's coverage reports, from historical stuff, use the Wayback Machine, archive.org. There's an API you can use for that. Get all these things together, and then you end up with a huge spreadsheet like this. And just like Oli mentioned, I use the APIs, so you can crawl the site once you've got your URLs with something like Screaming Frog, pulling in the GA and GSC APIs and the Ahrefs or Moz or Majestic APIs as well. So you can do a crawl and pull in traffic, Search Console, and backlink data all in at the same time. You end up with a huge sheet like this. And the cool thing with this is that I'm looking at all kinds of stuff. I'm looking at Search Console, I'm looking at traffic data, I'm looking at on-page elements like their title tags and the headings to actually work out if a page has been optimized for search or not, or if it's even indexable in the first place. I'm looking at all kinds of angles to make a decision using data, quantitative data to understand whether a page should be kept, revised, improved, or so on. You generally end up with a few options. Leave as is, optimize the content as it's good, but it hasn't been set up for SEO. Rework the content entirely, maybe it's the wrong format. Combine several pages together. Retire a page. That's the other one, right? Sort of just end up retiring a page because it's just no good for purpose. The From the Future article I mentioned earlier has a particularly good section on sort of how to make these decisions and some good ways to start thinking about it. The inventory is great. It opens the eyes of your client or management team. What exactly did that series of blog posts do, for example? Or what about those category pages that aren't getting any love? How important are they? It's important, though, not just to do an SEO mindset. I think with this, it's important to remember the other departments and things like that. And in the field of content strategy, there's been great writing about doing large-scale audits and inventories for big sites. We're covering all kinds of different topics, but the key thing of it is that you want to look at it from the entire business perspective, not just SEO, before you start recommending dumping lots of bits of content, because then people aren't going to listen to your recommendations. There goes an example there from Brain Traffic, really good article, and kind of their recommendation of how they do their content strategy audit. You can see it looks very similar to how we might end up doing an SEO one. So it's sort of two sides of the same coin, which is cool. The second aspect, of course, is qualitative, looking at stuff from a quality point of view. And what exactly is quality content? Well, the key to this, I think, is asking lots of questions. First, has the piece been given a chance to rank? Have we done all the good on-page stuff, things that Oli mentioned about looking at your competitors? Are we doing all the good stuff on page, like the foundational stuff? As a screen grab here from Moz's idea of what a great on-page SEO setup is for 2019. Going through that kind of checklist. Does it work on mobile? Does it have a good layout? Are there clear next steps? Is it uniquely valuable? All that kind of good stuff. Next, we've got competitor analysis. Again, Oli, because we talked about this before and we're singing from the same hymn sheet, we mentioned looking at competitors. So once you've got an idea that you're using, you've got the intent right, as Oli mentioned, and you've got the right format to match that intent, or at least what Google thinks the intent of the keyword is. What we want to do is make sure we're covering the subject as well as possible. Are we doing the right things? Are we covering the right beats to be able to rank? Are we comprehensive? Are we snappy enough? Are we in the right situation? Do we need video? All those kind of questions. A quick tip just on the next slide is if you're worried about intent or not quite sure, it's not about, there are clues on the search results themselves about what Google thinks the intent are, like are there shopping ads and so on. And some tools, like this is a grab from Systrix here, they actually have tools that let you put in keywords or all the keywords for a page or site and see what the intent might be based around the SERP features that you see for that keyword, which is really quite helpful. Okay, finally, what can your audience tell you about your content? Run tests. Before you start destroying whole pieces of your site and so on, run some tests, heat maps, user testing videos, surveys and so on. What feedback can you get from real humans on which pages are good on your site? Run comparison tests against the best ranking competitors to see the difference in quality of your 2 bits of content and where you're lacking and where they're doing particularly well. Might give you some ideas about what Google's rewarding rather than just trying to read it yourself from a more biased point of view. And that's it from me. Thank you very much.
That's great. Thank you both. We had some really excellent tips there. We've also got a few comments in the audience. So I'm going to pass over to Carrie, who will ask some of those questions.
Great, thank you. So first question we have is from Andy. What tips do the speakers have to target pages for FAQ schema?
I'll take this one if you want. So FAQ schema, it's a point that Charlie touched upon at the end. It all comes down to testing. Obviously, a lot of people have produced studies around FAQ schema and the impact on click-through rate if you're giving away too much and then generating sort of more of those zero-click searches. But you just need to understand how people are engaging with it. Is it stopping people going onto your site ultimately? But also back to the earlier point about intent, I see a lot of product pages that feature FAQs which are more informational in focus. So what is X product, for example, when that may be better placed as a guide. So you may want to cover that in more of an informational piece and have more transactional focus FAQs on your product page. So again, it's just understanding what's being rewarded, really.
Yeah, I concur with everything that Oli said. Just make sure you're using it in the right places. And there's in the guidelines around them. It lays out pretty clearly the kind of formatting that works well for it and so on as well. So yeah, do that. And Google have said, I can't remember what it was now, to be honest with you, whether it was John or Gary or whoever it was, but applying FAQ schema to every product page for your just general FAQs on delivery returns and things like that is not appropriate. So just do it only on those informational articles where you're going to really sort of do those step-by-step processes. But I like FAQ schema. I think it's a really, how to schema, FAQ schema, that kind of stuff. In terms of making your content stand out, it's good. And if nothing else, it gives you a template for your post to follow, which is quite good because that's the kind of way Google likes to appreciate things. It sort of forces you into the right kind of format that, in theory, should get rewarded.
Great, thank you. We have another question from Chris for Charlie. How much data is enough for a content audit? How much is too much? Where do you draw the line? And does this change from time to time? That line.
I think That's a great question. And I think if you ask most of my clients, the bit where it's too much is whatever I present to them, because they normally have the deer in the headlights look afterwards. But I think the idea, the minimum you need for me is organic traffic, organic conversions, all traffic. So not in the sessions, but page views. So how often, popular is that page? Maybe unique page views is the right way to describe that. And then potentially all conversions. Then you want backlink data, and perhaps, because it should be readily available, search console impression and click data. With that, you're going to be able to kind of go, here is the bare minimum of what success looks like. And the Ahrefs and Coding is for Losers templates use that. I personally, for me, I would go a little bit further, and I'd also want to know simple things you can get from a crawl of the page, like, are things optimized for it? How many in links are there? What's the page depth? Because if the page is buried away or orphaned or something, then it's not going to be a struggle to rank, and it's not actually the content's fault, it's your setup's fault. So I want a little bit of that context as well, maybe a bit about word count and so on and stuff like that. So I would kind of go for that as the bare minimum. How much is too much? I think anything where big it becomes impractical, where it's, you're looking at it as the expert and you're sort of going, I'm not even looking at some of these columns. Anything you can't make a decision on is too much. So for example, organic sessions, make a decision on, it's not getting organic things here, I know I can make a decision about that. If it's something along the lines of, does it have the meta keyword tag or not, it's nice to know that, but you can't make a decision about whether the page is working or not because of that or not. So I would say that's that little bit too far for me. And also bear in mind, of course, the bigger you make it and the more VLOOKUPs you have, the more likely you're going to break your spreadsheet. So anything to reduce data is just a good thing. And
just on that, I'd also start, before commencing the content audit, have an understanding of the business objectives as well, and what is really key, just to guide your discovery as well. Obviously you can, and I've done it myself, sort of be absorbed by huge amounts of data, but you've got to appreciate what's going to make a business impact.
Yeah, the great thing about doing an inventory like this is it gives you loads of data on lots of different parts of the website. So it gives you lots of practical actions. Oh, we can see this section isn't working here, but let's do this. This section hasn't got enough internal links. Let's do this. It's all about doing those quick, smart, improvements constantly. Anything that kind of stops you from doing that, or if your setup's not right towards that, then it's not as valuable to you. So 100% agree with Oli there.
Great, thank you for the advice. Do you, Charlie, so you shared a screenshot of a big data sheet. Do you have a template for that to share? Everyone loved it.
People are more than welcome to buy it from me if they wish to. I can sell one to them. I don't have a template, no, simply because I'm lazy and I haven't got around to it, but I should do one, at least a simple sort of one that people to use. It's a good shout. Keep nagging me and I will do one.
Okay, great. So we have a question for Oli. You said to condense the content on one page instead of just adding more content. Is there a maximum length post you would recommend? Some brands may have 10,000 words in just one blog post.
So sort of the first part of that question regarding sort of the consolidation, there is a word of caution with any of that type of approach, and it does need to, like I say, be focused on intent, and you need to understand if there is sort of a one hub page and then has sort of clusters off it that are better served, as opposed to going down that ultimate guide, sort of everything into one sort of approach. In terms of content and consolidating that, look what's valuable. I certainly wouldn't carry across content just for the sake of it, but if it has got traffic before, or it is relevant and it complements the stronger piece, then I'd certainly carry it across. But it's just about understanding, is this content adding value to that particular page? Is it worth including, and does it actually offer something by retaining it on the page? But yeah, word of caution with consolidation, but you need to consider sort of particularly everything that Charlie touched upon before making those calls.
Great, thank you. I have another question for you as well. Could you what do you think of tags and categories used in WordPress? Some people like to use both, but could this not lead to duplicate content?
Yeah, certainly. They typically are sort of more the thinner content and less valuable. But sometimes if they're sort of treated as a landing page in their own right, they can sort of nicely consolidate pages and different articles around that particular topic. But as a rule of thumb, I don't particularly like them, but ultimately you've got to see how people engage with them before making a call.
I will add a little bit on there that I agree with Oli. For me, you need one or the other. They kind of like originally had two different purposes in WordPress, but over the course of time, the functionality became very similar. And I think if you, in most businesses that are using blogs, WordPress blogs, you use categories for a very specific purpose, and what you want to do is you want to have them, and you want to have a set number of them. Like, you know, we have 12 categories that we cover or something like that, and then you don't use tags, or vice versa. I think the more important thing is definitely not to just let the team just choose their own tags or categories and just add them willy-nilly, because all you end up then with like, you know, multiple articles. Sorry, an article with multiple tags or categories that no other article has, and that's where you end up with the duplicate content and very thin content, because you have multiple tag or, you know, sort of landing pages all showing the same one article. So constrict the use of them. If you control it, they're really good. It can be really powerful, and they can be great landing pages, little hub pages targeting things, just like Oli said. But it's all about that management aspect. Content management is so key. Doing a content inventory is great. Doing content audit is fantastic. But you don't actually manage your content when you're publishing and so on. There's not really, you're making life so much harder for yourself generally.
Yeah, definitely. So one last question for either of you or both of you. Have you ever deleted content from a site after a content audit, and how did your client react?
Go on, you go first.
Deleting content, again, it would only come down if there's no benefit of retaining that content whatsoever. As a minimum, you should 301 them if there has been any links or any previous traffic. Deleting content would be very much a last resort for very poor, thin content. But in terms of how the client reacted, just they need to be on the same page. They've probably put their heart and soul into putting this content together once upon a time, and they just need to be on the same page, and they need to know the objective from the piece of work, that yes, we are going through the site and we will be culling areas that aren't adding value and are just bloating the site, and yeah, hopefully the results of the back of it will show and sort of be vindicated in that decision making process, really. But yeah, it'd be weak, very weak content in that case.
Have I deleted data from a website? Yes, many a time. How's the client reacted? Normally it's fine, because I don't delete it without telling them or anything like that. That'd be a great surprise, wouldn't it, one morning when for a meeting? But the no, I delete it because most websites have stuff on it, stuff that's just old and forgotten about, stuff that's duplicated without people realizing, you know, because of technical setups, or stuff that just isn't performing very well and we can do something better and it's not in the right place anymore. So I do delete it, and most of the time there's something that I've not ever had a particularly massive negative impact, because I'm only deleting pages that weren't having any impact on the business in the first place, exactly like Oli said. So, you know, generally it's positive. I can't give you a graph of we deleted this and it went straight up like this, because you were doing other stuff at the same time, but it is very cool. There was a great article from Siege Media, I think 18 months ago or so, don't quote me on the date, that was talking about when they did some auditing and deleting work and how effective it was in the process they went through, and that is a great read about the topic.
Great, thank you. Well, that's all the questions we have today, so back over to Jo.
Great, thank you very much, Kerry. Well, we'd be very interested to hear more about that article if you were able to share it later. We'll definitely be tagging you both on Twitter and LinkedIn. Thank you very much for coming today. Thank you to our audience as well. As I said, this is our 40th session. So if you've enjoyed what you've seen so far, like the video, subscribe to our channel, as we'll be having more Tea Time SEO sessions coming up. So tomorrow, we actually have Helen. She was here and opened up the first Tea Time SEO session on March the 30th. And she'll be giving some great tips around Google Analytics and those key reports that you need. So there'll be a slightly longer session tomorrow, about 10 minutes, as she's solo on stage. So please come back, give your support to Helen. That's tomorrow at 4 p.m. Thank you again to Oli and Charlie for being on the Tea Time SEO show today. If you would like to be on stage, be with Oli or be in Oli and Charlie's place, or even if they would like to come back again, please let Carrie know. We are sending out the agendas weekly, and also some wrap-up of the blog post too. We'll be running this all through June, Mondays and Thursdays at least in June. Who knows, we may continue this again in July. But thank you very much, everyone, for coming today. And we'll see you tomorrow for Google Analytics with Helen. Thank you. I'll just end the broadcast now.